having a little bit of technical difficulty here. Yeah, right. So that's all right. Have to use your mind's eye, right? Hopefully your Bible has pictures. Oh, hold on. We may be... Oops, I just connected to another classroom. They won't like that. I don't know. Okay, we're going to wrap up tonight. We're going to finish up the swarms of insects, and then we'll get into the fifth plague, and talking about the pestilence on livestock. And so we'll get into that a little bit later. I wasn't going to bring slides up from, we've already seen the dung beetle enough, I think. So Lori said that she went back and watched it afterwards, and Chuck said that he was leaving it on the slides instead of on me, and she said that dung beetle was up there a long time. I was like, yeah, I guess it was. So y'all just have to use your mind's eye to take care of that. Okay, we talked about the plague or the swarm of insects and the different types of insects it could have been. We focused on the beetle and how that it was revered in the Egyptian culture because it was supposed to be the item or the being that brought the sun up and around every day. And so they looked at it for creation, rebirth, and renewal. And they figured that since the beetle came out of these balls of dung, that it created itself because it came from nothing. So they figured, well, it must have been here. It must have always been here, or it created itself because it came from nothing and reproduces from nothing. And so that's just the cycle of life that they saw and how it would impact them as far as the way the sun would work. So anyway, so it was valuing the wrong thing. We talked about that a little bit last week, valuing the wrong thing. It seems foolish to value a beetle or an insect, doesn't it? It seemed foolish to do that. But it was a deity to them. So the plagues were attacking the actual gods of the Egyptian culture, of their society. And so by attacking them, then God's looking to get their attention to introduce who he was. Because they could do nothing except for what they were given by the people, what their powers were, what their domain was. And so they were looking at them doing all these things, but they were nothing except for God's creation. That's all they were. So God attacked them, the deities that they had, to show who he was. And in this particular case, it was the scarab beetle, as far as looking at it as from an insect standpoint. So we looked at valuing things that are of the world that are foolish. And we talked about money. Money is a necessary tool we have to be able to live, to be able to survive. But we cannot have money being the focus of our whole existence. Because Timothy is told by Paul the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. But we determined that we could put anything in there, not just money. We could put anything where it could elevate above God. And if we elevate something above God, then that is idolatry. And that's what we have to be careful with. We also talked about fame and attention and power and just think about. I was considering what it means to be a celebrity today versus what it meant to be a celebrity 50 years ago. Think about the difference for a second. How many people do you hear about that are supposed to be famous and we have no clue who they are? You had anything like that here recently? Where you'll see somebody say, oh, they're famous. And here's what it is because we are so connected There's so many avenues for information. People can have their little niche of being famous where other people have no idea. Now, 50 years ago, if someone was famous, most people knew who they were, didn't they? They would know. Go back farther than that. If somebody was famous, if they were a celebrity, most people would know who they were. Today, because of all the avenues of communication and connection that we have, people can be famous, and majority of people could have no clue about who they are. So think about the desire. When you ask kids or young people what they would like to be, I promise you some of them are going to say influencers. And you may be saying, what does that mean? An influencer is a big deal today. It's a big deal. Companies are paying millions of dollars to people to be influencers. And what are they influencing? They're influencing kids and people to buy certain things, products or whatever it is. They are peddling these products, and they are an influencer, and they get paid to do that. Here's how they become an influencer. It's because they have a lot of eyeballs on what they do. That's how they become an influencer. Here's another thing you might hear. A kid may say, well, I want to be a gamer. No, I'm not talking about a hobby. No, I'm saying I want to be a gamer as far as my career. People get paid to play video games. I gave my nephew a hard time. He was watching YouTube videos of people playing video games. He was not playing the video game. He was watching somebody else play the game. So you see how you get caught up in this idea of fame and celebrity and the things that are out there that are appealing, and how it influences our kids and influences adults as well. So that's putting value in something that's worthless. It's worthless. But I mean, these people, there are people that make millions of dollars just by putting videos out on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, all these things. See, that's something new. It's something new. But that's one of those things that it seems foolish to put value in that, doesn't it? It does to me. But how many of us, you don't have to raise your hand, are watching those videos? Maybe not the ones of the influencers for kids, but how many of those videos are we watching? I do. If I need to work on something, you know what I do? I'll look it up. And I'll figure out how to do it. And then I'll figure out real quick, they don't know any more than I do. I can't tell you how many times I've looked up something in particular about how to get started on a project, working on a vehicle or working on a tractor or whatever, and I'm watching a video and it's terrible. It's terrible. They can't keep their camera still and all that, and these people are getting paid. And it blows my mind that that kind of thing happens. So that's another thing that people pay attention to today is fame and celebrity and just so many things that are worthless. What about the reality TV shows that are out there today? How ridiculous they are. How ridiculous they are. And looking at, really it's just glorification of self, isn't it? That's really what it boils down to, is glorification of self. When we think about beauty and influence and power and attention and all these things and success, and we measure by how high we climb up a ladder that somebody else has put there, and that ladder leads to nowhere. If that is our pursuit, it leads to nowhere. How many times have we seen somebody that did have fame, somebody that did have celebrity, somebody that did make it is in terms of the world is concerned, and then lose it all? We've seen that, haven't we? I remember, when I was a teenager, MC Hammer was big, all right? So, yeah, MC Hammer's big. But listen, some of y'all are thinking about some of his songs right now, I know, right? So he was big. This was late 80s, early 90s, and at Hammer time, right? And the guy built an indoor softball field for his buddies to play softball. I mean, that's arriving, isn't it? That's having wealth like you just cannot believe. He lost it all. Lost it all. So see, when we focus on things that and put value on things that don't matter, it can go away just like that. Just like that. These professional sports players, their careers, very, very few have a long career in professional sports. Just the superstars do that. But most of them, it's very short and it happens quickly. They get paid a lot of money from a regular standpoint of everybody else in the world. But then it's so short-lived, it's gone. It's gone. So what value are we putting in things that don't matter and things that don't go anywhere? Just like going back to that dung beetle is just a ball of filth, right? It's just a ball of filth. Matthew 16, verse 26, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul or loses his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? We see that today, don't we? Don't we see what people are willing to give in exchange for their soul? And if we have a little bit of success and then we continue to try to pursue that, we can lose our soul because of it. That story I was talking about as far as the young couple that got married and he was faithful and then she was determined to change him, and she did, and pulled him away from God, and then by pulling him away from God also pulled him away from her too. See, we can lose more than just our soul. It also affects us here in life. Let's look at a few more scriptures here, and then we'll wrap up this fourth plague. Philippians 3, this is the attitude to have that we have as far as the things in life. And it doesn't mean that we can't have anything, can't enjoy stuff. It doesn't mean that at all. It is we can't put our trust in that. Jesus said you don't put your hope and trust in things that moth and rust can destroy or somebody can steal. We lay up our treasures where? Where do we lay up our treasures? In heaven. In heaven. Because nothing can happen to that as long as we stay close to God. So let's look at Philippians chapter 3 and verse 7. This is Paul talking about what he gave up to be a follower of Christ. He says in verse 7, but what things were gained to me, these I've counted loss for Christ. Yet indeed I also count all things loss for the excellence of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them as rubbish, that I may gain Christ, and be found in him, not having my own righteousness, which is from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness which is from God by faith, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death, if by any means I may attain the resurrection from the dead. So he's saying, listen, and he went through and he talked about, he was a Hebrew of Hebrews. He was very knowledgeable when it came to the law. He had all these things going for him. He was a Roman citizen alongside that. So he had all these worldly things to attribute to who he could be. But then he said, you know what? All that was considered rubbish when I started being a follower of Christ. Now, it doesn't mean he quit working. What was Paul's occupation? Right, he was bivocational, Robert. He was a tent maker by trade, but he was a proclaimer too. So did he still continue working even though he started preaching? He did. How do we know that? Who did he meet that actually were in the same business that he was in? Okay, Aquila and Priscilla, or Prisca, that you may see sometimes her name mentioned. Aquila and Priscilla, they were tent makers. And they ended up being faithful converts. So you still work, you still take care of business, you still take care of your family and all that, but you put God first. God comes before everything else, and not the pursuit of all these other things that are out there. So one more, Psalm 84 and verse 10. Psalm 84 and verse 10, and we'll wrap this one up. And thinking about having the right attitude toward our relationship with God and having our priorities right. Psalm 84 and verse 10, for a day in your courts is better than 1,000. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. Okay? Rather be the doorkeeper instead of dwell in tents of wickedness. And what is a tent? Is a tent a permanent dwelling? What's a tent made for? Temporary. What did Paul say that our body is? It's a tent. It's a temporary dwelling because we have a place prepared for us for those that are faithful. That's a permanent dwelling that we have in heaven. Okay. Anybody have any comments about that before we move on? Valuing the wrong kind of thing when it comes to spiritual matters.
It's sort of like a lot of the Twilight Zone
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. And it's one of those things to where we put so much hope in something that we think is really going to be something for us and really deliver for us, and it doesn't. And a lot of times we're disappointed. And when we're disappointed, then we realize, oh, we made a mistake by putting all that time and effort into something that was worthless. Has value as far as the world is concerned, but it's worthless to us spiritually. Okay, sorry I keep giving you all these wonderful pictures to look at, but I want to make sure that we drive the point home as far as these plagues were not just some nuisance. All right, they weren't just some nuisance. Now, I will say, except for the blood in, all right, the blood in the Nile and the water supply being turned to blood, I mean, that was more than just a nuisance because you have to have water to survive. But still, it was temporary, right? It was temporary. And then you had the other ones. You had the frogs that were all running around everywhere. That was temporary. You had the dirt or the dust turning into annoying insects. That was temporary. You had the swarms of insects. That was also temporary. But now we've got something that's going to have a longer-term effect. We have this pestilence on livestock. Let's read this account, first of all, and then we'll talk about it, and then see how it applies to the Egyptian deities. So let's look at Exodus chapter 9. And what plague are we on? I thought it was up there.
5.
Yeah. Fifth one. So Exodus 9 and verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go into Pharaoh and tell him, thus says the Lord God of the Hebrews, let my people go, that they may serve me. For if you refuse to let them go and still hold them, behold, the hand of the Lord will be on your cattle in the field, on the horses, on the donkeys, on the camels, on the oxen, and on the sheep, a very severe pestilence. And the Lord will make a difference between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt, so nothing shall die of all that belongs to the children of Israel." Then the Lord appointed a set time, saying, "Tomorrow the Lord will do this thing in the land." So the Lord did this thing on the next day, and all the livestock of Egypt died, but of the livestock of the children of Israel, not one died. Then Pharaoh sent, and indeed not even one of the livestock of the Israelites was dead, but the heart of Pharaoh became hard, and he did not let the people go. So we have this that happens. So now it's not just a nuisance. We've got livestock. Now, one thing we need to bring out, it says that, let's see here. It says that all, I'm trying to find the verse where it says that all will die. I thought I marked it and I didn't. Okay, verse 6. So the Lord did this thing on the next day, and all the livestock of Egypt died. When you go to the 7th plague, it also says that livestock died then. So we have to pretty much define what all means. So could it be the ones that were just in the field? Could it mean all sorts of, or could it mean all over the place? Or I don't think we can. I know we can't take that literal as being every one of them, because we have another plague that comes that affects livestock as well. Okay, so this was particular ones, and it does say the ones in the field in verse 3. And so it's don't get bothered by that, because I mean it could have been just the inability to explain it from Hebrew to English in the way that we would understand. But still, just think about all sorts of, or all over the place, livestock died. Now let's look at this. First off, what is pestilence? What's pestilence? I'm sorry? Okay, but what in particular is pestilence? It's something specific. What would it involve? All right, we could look at COVID as being pestilence.
It's an epidemic that causes death.
Okay, so it is a widespread disease that causes death. So that's pestilence. That's what that is. So it could be an epidemic that could be. Epidemic can be regional, right? It's pandemic that's global. Is that what it is? All right. So it's a broad area that's being affected by disease. That's what pestilence is. And when you think about this, this was a plague on not just of inconvenience, it was a plague on the economy. Let's talk about cattle for a little bit, okay? So if a large number of the cattle died, how long, Josh, is it going to take to replace all those herds? How long is it going to take? All right, you got a female calf, a heifer calf that hits the ground today. How long is it going to be before she has her own calf? Over 2 years, right? I mean, I really like for my heifer calves to be 18 months old before I want them to be bred. I want them to be big enough. So, I mean, and now you're talking about if a heifer calf is bred at 18 months and then 9 more months later before she has a calf. See how that could hurt the economy too? So it's not just something of inconvenience. It was something that affected them on out, not just right then. So it created misery on them and their economy. It only, the others were short-lived and lasted a few days. This one may have only lasted a few days, but it had long-term effects. See the difference there? These others, remember what happened to the frogs? They got piled up, right? And eventually they decomposed and went away. This affected their economy, it affected their livelihood, affected their ability to eat. When you're talking about herds of all these different types of animals, they're considered livestock. So if it takes years for these animals to mature and to produce and reproduce, and that's how it has the long-term effects on them. So you need to look at it that way. This was attacking not just their livelihood, but also wealth. Because someone that owned a lot of livestock would have been considered wealthy. We think about going back to Abraham. How was he described as far as being wealthy? I mean, he had livestock and herds upon herds and servants, and this was part of his wealth that he had. So the ones that were being inflicted by this were the ones that were not only the ones that were on the lower end, but also the ones that were wealthy in this society. So just keep that in mind. So God is attacking not just with a plague of inconvenience, but one that's going to affect them, even their pocketbooks. This is a carving dedicated to Apis. A-P-I-S is a bull god in Egypt. Now, we're going to talk about the Exodus later, but when the children of Israel get out of Egypt and then Moses is gone for 40 days, what'd they do? What did Aaron allow them to do? Of what? What was it? Okay, so it was a golden calf, wasn't it? Where do you think they got that idea? Where do you think they just imagine, hey, let's bow down to a bovine, to a goat? No, that's where they came from. And remember, generations upon generations were living in Egypt. So they would not have known anything different. So that's what they were exposed to. So this is showing a relief, a sketching or carving of this bull with the horns and someone bowing down to it. This is in the Louvre, and the Apis bull it was the creator god. It was the manifestation of the creator god to the Egyptians. That's how important it was. It was the god of fertility. It was also associated with divinity. And can you think about all the different gods we looked at so far? How many of them were related to fertility and renewal? And about all of them, right? About all of them. This one in particular was right up there near the top as far as what they would worship. Here's another one. This is a statuette of again this bull, this Apis bull, being bowed down to by Pharaoh. One of the pharaohs being bowing down to it. They would keep a bull alive and determine them. It's kind of like the mascots, for college football. You've got UGA, for Georgia, and it's not the original UGA. Because bulldogs don't live very long, so they have to have a lineage of them. So they keep it around. They're kind of idolized. They would keep an actual bull around, and they would walk him through the streets, and it would be worshipped as a god and used for prophecy. And walking through the streets would also be like it was symbolic of fertilizing the entire land. All right, Josh.
Isn't it like in India or somewhere that they still like worship?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, the Hindus, cows are sacred. They're sacred. And you got to remember too, if this is deity, the livestock that they had was for different purposes. But if this is deity, I mean, it would have been also against the law. It would have been illegal to mistreat an animal like that, because every animal that was out there was one of their gods, is the way they looked at it. Isn't that backwards? Who did God put over the dominion of creation? Man. And what have they done? Man has elevated all of creation above themselves. That's what took place. But isn't that what happens today? What about, I shouldn't use term tree hugger, I guess. I don't know. Is that derogatory by saying tree hugger? I've got pictures of my daughter. We would go places and she'd be hugging big trees, and I just took pictures of her doing that, just for fun. But I mean, some people have elevated God's creation above even people. Haven't we seen that? That nature is their God. Environmentalists. Okay, thank you. That's the correct way, the politically correct way of saying it. Environmentalist. Okay. Hey, I'm all for protecting God's creation and not misusing it, not mistreating it. But when it comes to the point to where you've elevated that above God, and a lot of these environmentalists don't even believe in God, and that's the crazy part about it, is they don't even believe in God. So the same kind of thing happens today, to where people will take things and elevate them above God and even above people. So that's what we have to be mindful of.
They believe that nature and earth is their God.
Yes.
They elevated that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And the same thing has been done with pets, hasn't it? Y'all seen the commercials, the ASPCA and the Humane Society of the United States? Now listen, I have to give a little disclaimer here, okay? I'm going to get flagged, this being on YouTube. I know. I need to be careful. From a farming standpoint, here's the thing. The local Humane Society is not the same thing as the HSUS. It's not the same thing, okay? If you support and provide and help out your local Humane Society, that's fine. HSUS, to me, is a scam. They take in all this money. Very little money goes out toward the actual cause that they represent. Same thing with ASPCA, I'm sure. But people have elevated animals above. These people that elevate animals above people are the same ones that have no problem with abortion, for the most part. No problem with it, because it's two different things in their mind.
Well, that's wrong for those people that start an organization. But the people that send the money are the ones that...
It's sad, yeah. I mean, they play on emotions is what they do. I mean, you watch these poor little dogs that are crying in the commercials.
I turned to another channel.
And these commercials have gotten longer too. Have you noticed that? Seems like they take up several segments instead of just one 30-second spot. But see, it's this idea of elevating God's creation above people and above God himself. And that was the problem that we had here. So God is looking to reveal himself to Egypt, to Pharaoh, to the Israelites, saying, okay, you're looking to worship somebody, I'm it. I'm it. And I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to show you how I'm it, because all these things that you worship, I'm going to turn them against you. And that's exactly what he did with using these plagues. This is a mummified Apis bull, so one that was considered, I guess the mascot of the deity, of the Egyptian deity, would be mummified. There's a very interesting section of one of the Egyptian museums that I visited that was mummified animals. And I'm talking about, because cats are also a deity, but everything, cats, birds, dogs. I tell you, one that was really interesting was a whole separate place that was the was mummified crocodiles. Because crocodiles also were a god, and I've got pictures of these mummified crocodiles, and and they're doing that. Why? Why do they mummify? What's the purpose of it? Why do they mummify people?
To preserve them.
Okay, for what?
Afterlife.
For the afterlife. Okay, so why are they mummifying animals? Same thing. They're preserving them for their afterlife too. Because if Pharaoh is in the afterlife, he's got to have his servants. He's got to have his livestock. I showed you that little Shabti doll, little green Shabti doll that would be buried with the pharaohs, and they were to be their servants in the afterlife. Some of them would have shovels in their hands. Some would have threshing tools. That's what they would do in the afterlife. So see, they had all this. They had the afterlife thing right as far as, okay, there is something beyond the physical life, but it was just all out of whack. Okay, that's what God is looking to do. He's looking to show them that the things that you're doing are not the way that I intended and not the way that I go about things. So he's bringing it to them very real and personal by bringing these plagues. This is another one. This is Hathor. Now, this is the cow goddess. Okay, so you had the bull god, and then Hathor is the cow goddess. Now, what do you think she would be the goddess of? Okay, motherhood, fertility. So, what was the Apis bull also the god of? Fertility. What were some of these others? Gods and goddesses of fertility, renewal, that kind of thing. So here we are. This is Hathor, which is the cow version of the Apis bull. I will tell you that, remember the little amulets that I brought in that were the little beetles and had inscriptions on the back of them? We found in my square last time I was in Shiloh, one of the girls, the first day we were there, found a scarab. It's about the size of a dime, and it's the little beetle, and then on the back side of it was the inscription of Hathor. That was really neat to be able to see that. And why was that? Is because there were Egyptian city-states in Canaan. That's why you would have Egyptian items in Canaan, in the Promised Land, because they were sponsored and also got help from Egypt. But it was Hathor was on the inscription on that scarab. So when we have this one, this goddess here, this is the banquet scene from a tomb inside of a chapel, and if you notice in this banquet scene, okay, it's there's a celebration going on with music and dance, and there's also some nudity going on there, and also drunkenness. So this was celebration and dedication or the deification of pleasure. All right, and is that prominent today? Would you say that pleasure is deified? I mean, in every way you can imagine. Every way you can imagine. When you think about all the things that people are promoting and representing and living for, I mean, it's the deification of pleasure, self-gratification. And that's exactly what we it's nothing new what we deal with today. It's the unending search for something new, and unending search for something that's the new thing that's exciting, and the constant goal is to have pleasure, right? And doesn't that describe, I think, our society more than anything? Is just the constant pursuit of pleasure and the things that I think it's misused a lot, but the word happy, people looking for the things that make them happy. And it's just got things all turned upside down as far as what God had in mind. Let's look at Hebrews 13 real quick. Hebrews 13, because you're talking about the self-gratification that's going on with doing what's right for me and what I feel like is the best thing for me and the things that make me happy, and we see it paraded around the streets. And we see the perversion of sexuality paraded around in society, don't we? I mean, but who created sexuality? God did. For what purpose? For a godly purpose, right? So Hebrews 13 and verse 4 says, marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled, but fornicators and adulterers God will judge. All right? So is it possible to take something good that God made and pervert it? You better believe it. You better believe it. And that's one of Satan's tools, is taking things that are godly and right and pure when things are done in the right manner in the eyes of God, and perverting it and changing it to suit our own needs. What do you think if that is not showing a flippant nature toward sexual relationships, what is? What do you think the purpose is for these drag queen story hours for children? What do you think that purpose is? It's sickening. Well, I mean, why are they doing it? Anybody have an idea? Tom? Yeah. Absolutely they are. Absolutely they are. They know that if they expose these kids to this stuff young, then it's not going to be shocking. It's not going to be shocking. And I'm so thankful to see some of the pushback that's happening about some of this foolishness that's going on. Because first off, things like that should not be exposed to them at school or at the library. The parents have the right to introduce things to their kids, on their timetable. And now it's got to be earlier than ever to show the godly manner in which what was intended. At Fountainhead on Sunday nights, they don't have children's church. They have I don't know. I don't even remember what it's called, Fountainhead Kids or something like that. But right before they start, they have all the kids come down front and they recite. They have questions that they're asked, and they study these questions. And one of them is, what is God's plan for marriage? And you hear these little 5-year-olds saying, one man, one woman for life. See, if Satan is out there trying to indoctrinate our kids, we better be doing it at home. We better be doing it here. We better be doing it or showing them what God had planned from the very beginning, instead of it getting perverted out there in the world. So we have to do those things and be just as adamant about it, and more so than the ones that are doing it for Satan's side.
It's kind of weird that the government would subsidize adultery and punish marriage.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people not got married because they would get better insurance.
Or
Which we know that it'd be better to serve God.
yeah, taxes are better. If you here's the one of the big ones now. If you cohabitate, and you're planning on getting married later, but you cohabitate now to save money.
It's just, it's sort of like having reward for bad behavior.
Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. And it just goes back to the change agents in society, and that's what we're against. That's what we're against. And we have to be very vigilant and diligent against those change agents, because they want our kids. Satan wants our kids. Because if he gets them early, he's got a pretty good chance of keeping them if we don't get out there and fight him off. I told my daughter time and time again, I said, I know that sometimes Satan's got a hold of you, but I've got a harder grip on you than he does. I said, I'm not letting go. I'm not letting go. I said, I'm your daddy, and I'm taking it serious. And you may not like it. You may not like how I handle things. May not agree with it, but I said, I'm taking it serious. This is my job. It's my responsibility. And that's the way we have to be with our kids, with our children, no matter who they are, because their soul is so important and so precious. And that's what it's all about, is trying to help them, lead them, and get them to heaven, and not let them go by the ways of the world, the way things are going today. All right, we've got a couple more minutes here. Do you have something?
You started off earlier about Exodus 9:6 about all of the livestock.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard it explained, and I think this is correct, that the understanding is all the livestock that contracted the pestilence died.
Okay.
Not all of the livestock got the pestilence.
I like
All
that.
that contracted
All that got the disease, yeah, okay. I like that.
But it is, he says in verse 3, it was a severe pestilence. It wasn't an all-encompassing, but it was severe.
Yeah, you're right.
They contracted,
You're right.
They died.
Very good. I like that.
I'm just,
Well, there had to be some left, right?
yes.
Because of later plagues. So, okay, well, we'll stop there. Appreciate your participation as always.